We are still talking about Kramnik-Shirov counterattack. So it is about c4, e5, knight c3, bishop goes to b4. White should play knight d5. In the previous chapter, we talked about these two variations. Bishop goes to a5 and pawn goes to a5. Now let's analyze two main moves for black, bishop c5 and bishop e7. Let's start with bishop c5. Now white will play a quite normal move, e3, because we will see we want to prepare d4 in some variations. D4 would be great to play because d4 will be played with tempo. Okay, for example, what about c6? c6 is the main idea for black to attack our knight and to do that. Yeah, I mean, to play c6 with tempo to get rid of our knight. Let's play d4. If we go back, we'll just waste time. So of course not. Let's play d4. Two possible variations for black: c takes d5 or bishop goes to f8. If he takes on d4 with his pawn, we'll simply take back. That's good for us. I mean, we don't even have to analyze that. So let's play bishop f8 first. Maybe it looks odd, but believe me, this is definitely playable move for black, because after bishop f8 we have to retreat our knight. Knight goes back to c3. d6 for black, then our knight goes to f3, so quite normal development. Knight d7, bishop goes to e2. Knight gf6, short castle, bishop e7. This looks like a paired defense for black, or like a Philidor defense for black. I mean, he's just he created a setup like in hedgehog structures. So you know, I mean, he has very solid position, but white also has very good position here. So just e4. I mean, it was also possible to play b3 followed by bishop b2. I mean, definitely, if you are a big fan of fianchetto on the queen side, sure, you can do this. But e4 is also very good move for white, because then this c1 h6 diagonal is open. Short castle for black, and then queen goes to c2. a6, then rook goes to d1 with very good play for white. Then later h3, maybe bishop goes to e3, rook from a1 goes to c1, and so on. White is slightly better because white has more space. It's pretty much clear, I think. So yeah, let's just repeat what happened. So bishop b4, Kramnik-Shirov counterattack, the knight goes to d5, and black played bishop c5. We should play e3, and then black plays c6 to kick our knight. Then let's play d4. So we analyzed bishop f8 variation, just play normally, go back with the knight, play knight f3, play bishop e2 castle, and then after bishop e7, e4 is, in my opinion, the best move for him. What will happen if black doesn't retreat his bishop, if he takes the knight instead? Then let's take the bishop, of course, the only move for us. And again, we have same situation we had many times before. Black doesn't have his dark squared bishop on the board. That is very good for us. Two options for black, queen a5 or d takes c4. Let's see queen a5 first. This looks tempting for black because he will take our c5 pawn. Of course, bishop d2, queen c5. Black is up a pawn, but his development is very slow. He's behind in development, obviously, and white can do something like this because of that. Queen g4. The g7 pawn is attacked. G6 most likely. I mean, king f8 is much worse or something like that. So g6 is natural move. Then let's play b4 to attack the queen. Queen goes back to d6. Then let's take the d5 pawn. Knight goes to f6 with tempo, as you see, and then queen goes to c4, attacking the bishop. Knight goes to a6. Rook goes to c1. Now we are threatening to take. Rook takes. Rook takes. We'll also take the h8 rook. We will be material up. What is interesting here? I mean, black could castle, but white is going to be better anyway, because you see, first of all, we have dark squared bishop. That is very important because I mean, here the dark square bishop is priceless. Also, he already weakened his dark squares on the king side. He played g6, which means these squares are weakened, and we're going to try to put our bishop on c3 and to create some threats there. Now b5 is possible. Knight has to go away. Then there is bishop b4 threat. Okay. In this concrete moment, yeah, black is completely lost. So don't worry if he takes your c5 pawn. It's almost like a trap. You should play queen g4, and then after g6, b4, followed by c takes d5. Okay, so what if he doesn't take the pawn on c5? What if he takes on c4? Because his d5 pawn is hanging, as you see, it's attacked twice. Then let's take there with the bishop. Again, queen a5 would be wrong, because then just bishop d2, and then after queen c5, just a normal move for us. But in this moment, definitely the best, just rook c1. There is bishop takes f7 threat, discovered attack. So queen goes back to b6. I mean, he's trying to get out of that pin. But then just bishop takes f7, the game is over. This bishop on c8 is hanging also. His position is totally ruined. I mean, black is falling apart right now. I mean, after king f7, rook c8, just develop your knight, threaten to take this one, or to play knight g5. Later, activate your queen on f3 or h5. Just black king is in the mate net right now. Also, he cannot move any of these two knights because rooks on a8 and h8 are hanging. Horrible, horrible situation for black. Of course, you see, it's very bad for him to take the c5 pawn. I hope you understand this. So knight d5 is the third move for us, and then bishop goes to c5. Then white should play e3, and then we analyze the positions that arise after c6. So after c6, you should play d4. We analyzed both variations for black, c takes d5 and bishop f8. What will happen if black doesn't play c6? If he plays something like knight c6. I mean, he wants to prevent d4 and b4, because b4 is, we will see, is also possible for us in some variations. So knight c6, yes. What to do? Let's play knight e2. First of all, we prepare d4. Second of all, this knight will be well placed on c3. Knight f6 for black. There is no way that he can bring one more attacker for the d4 square. Then let's play d4. E takes d, e takes d. Knight takes d5. Again, which piece to take? The knight or the bishop? In this case, it's better to take the knight, because this variation is forced. Now both pieces are hanging, and black has to play bishop e4, so this variation is basically forced. Bishop e4 check is the only move, then knight goes to c3, black knight goes back to e7. Our bishop goes to d3. As you see, we sacrifice our d5 pawn. Black takes it, and then short castle, we sacrifice also the pawn on c3. So what will happen in that case? Knight c3, bc3, bishop c3. Then let's play bishop a3. This is famous motive. In a few openings we can find something like this. To sacrifice 2 pawns, but to get decisive attack. If he takes the rook, for example, just to show you, then just queen e2, and after queen e7, checkmate. If he doesn't take the rook, if he played d6, this is the best move to close diagonal for our dark colored bishop. Then just rook c1. Bishop is hanging. Bishop has to go back to a5. If bishop takes on d4, then just give this check, and then it's discovered attack. It's check, and the bishop is hanging. So now after c6, take the bishop and take the g7 pawn. Now the rook is hanging. There is also rook fe1 threat. Black position is falling apart. Yes. Okay, so he goes back to a5. In that case, let's do this. Queen goes to h5. This is like very long threat, but you see bishop is hanging. Bishop goes back to b6. Then rook fe1 check. King goes to f8. If bishop e6, then just d5. So king f8. Then our bishop on d3 is attacking the h7 pawn. It's not so bad, but it can be even better. So we do this, bishop c4. There is queen f7 mate threat. So queen f6 should be played for black. What else? I mean, that's the only move. And then rook goes to c3, fantastic move. And then after rook f3, there is no way out. Black is losing because the f7 pawn is critical. It will fall. As you see, it's not good for black to accept our offers, to accept our sacrifices, because he will lose soon. He's simply behind in development, and he cannot afford to take all those pawns, all that material. Of course, that he will have like consequences. So what I wanted to say, yeah, knight d5 is okay move for him. He took 1 pawn, then we castled short, then he took here. We took, and then we saw that if he takes on c3 with his bishop, he's most likely losing the game. Maybe it would be better for him just to go back to e7. So he won 1 pawn, and that is enough for him. Now let's play queen h5. We prevent short castle. If he castles short, then mate on h7. So g6 now for him. By the way, h6 would be also wrong, because we can play something like rook e1, and then after a castle, we can sacrifice our bishop on h6. Black is completely lost. So g6 is maybe more solid for him, but then again queen h6 and short castle is impossible. Maybe d5, then rook goes to e1. Good move. Now there is bishop g5 threat. This bishop is pinned. So he played bishop e6. And then there is very nice sacrifice for white. Bishop takes g6, and white has advantage. Okay. Yeah, if black doesn't take the pawn on d5, if he plays something like bishop takes c3, b takes c3, and then d6. This is definitely possible for him, but c4, we are going to play rook e1, queen f3. To develop our pieces, this bishop can go to g5. We're clearly better here. We have more space, better development. Bishop pair, especially our dark squared bishop, black doesn't have it, and that is why white is better. So yeah, what happened? So knight d5 was played, then bishop c5, and then e3 in order to play d4. Black played knight c6 to prevent d4, but then we played knight e2. So now knight f6, d4, e takes, and then knight d5. We take with our c pawn on d5, then after bishop b4, knight c3, knight goes to e7, and then we play bishop d3. We sacrifice the d5 pawn. Later we'll sacrifice the pawn on c3, and we have very good play here. What will happen if black doesn't play knight c6? So far we talked about c6 and knight c6. What if he play knight e7? If he play knight e7, we can play b4. Knight takes d5. Then we take with our pawn on c5. I mean, now this is interesting because, again, we have two options. Now c takes d5 doesn't work because of bishop takes b4, as simple as that. So that is why we take the bishop. Knight goes back to f6. Then d4. Let's connect those pawns and let's gain more space in the center. If black takes, that's good for us, because then e takes d4, we have fantastic central pawns. We are going to develop our pieces normally, like this, castle. This bishop can pin the knight, for example, and white setup is very good. So after d4, he played queen e7 instead. He threatens to take the pawn on d4. We cannot take back with the pawn because there is a pin on the e file. So let's just play bishop b2. Short castle for him, knight goes to f3. The e5 pawn is hanging, so he takes on d4, e takes d4, rook goes to e8, and this is something, I mean, we already did. Just rook b1 followed by rook b3 and rook e3. So b6 for black, rook goes to b3, b takes c5, then rook goes to e3. We sacrifice a pawn, but we have very good position. Queen f8, then rook takes e8, queen takes, short castle, bishop goes to b7, and then our bishop goes to g5 with threat to take on f6 and to double his pawns. He played knight e4. That's something very natural, quite obvious move. And then let's play rook e1. There is bishop d3 idea to pin the knight. And why is white better here? Because black has these two undeveloped pieces, so he is clearly behind in development. Yes, black is up a pawn, but here one pawn more or less, it doesn't really matter. White is clearly better. So this variation is also very interesting for white. You see, again, we sacrifice a pawn in the opening, but we have very good compensation for it. So after bishop b4, knight d5 is played, then bishop goes to c5, e3, and then knight f6. This is the same variation like knight e7. So basically, it doesn't really matter if he plays knight e7 or knight f6, it will be the same. So knight f6, for example, b4. Yeah, d4 is something completely else. Now d4 is totally different, also playable, but b4 is even stronger for you. So basically, black takes the knight on d5, and then we take the bishop, and we have knight f6, d4, queen e7 variation where we sacrifice a pawn, so rook e8, and now white cannot castle because the bishop on e2 is hanging, so rook b1 followed by rook b3 and e3, and we will sacrifice our c5 pawn for initiative. B takes c, rook e3, and castle followed by bishop g5 and rook e1. There is one more sub-variation to see. If when he plays knight f6 after e3, we play b4. What will happen if he goes back with his bishop to e7? Then let's take the bishop. We said a few times that dark squared bishop is very important in all these variations. So we can choose here. We can take the bishop or take the knight. It's better to take the bishop. Queen e7 and then bishop goes to b2. If he takes the b4 pawn, that's a mistake, clear mistake, because he gives his central e5 pawn. Then his queen goes back to e7. Then let's take the c7 pawn. I know maybe it looks risky, but it's very good for white because black cannot trap your bishop or something like that. Now we just want to win material. That's it. If he played d6, then just take the knight on b8, simplify position because you're material up. Rook b8, knight f3, develop your bishop like this, bishop e2, pawn goes to d4, short castle, white is up a pawn and white is much better here already. So this 6 is not good. Maybe let's see knight c6. Then let's play bishop g3 to get out of there. Short castle, then just knight f3. Again, the same idea, bishop e2, short castle, d4. White is up a pawn and white is already much better. So yeah, it's not good for black to take the b4 pawn. What else? He could play short castle, that's better. But then let's play a3. Let's protect the pawn. d6 for black, and then knight goes to e2. We had this similar situation like a few times before, and we said there are two options, knight f3 or knight e2, which one to choose. Knight e2 is more flexible because our knight will be better on c3 than on f3. If you play knight f3, it is possible for black to play e4 at some point. Also, our knight on f3 doesn't do so much, you know. On the other hand, on c3, it's good because we can jump on d5 at some point. I mean, it's definitely more flexible there than on f3. b6 for black, then knight goes to c3, bishop b7, then let's play d4. E takes d4, otherwise we can simply push the pawn and block his light squared bishop. Queen takes d4, maybe a5, and then let's play bishop e2, followed by short castle. Why black cannot take the g2 pawn? I think it is obvious, because then rook g1, when bishop goes back, then after knight d5, he's completely lost. This pawn is lost, this knight is also lost. I mean, just take a look, this diagonal is deadly for black. So yeah, most likely he plays something like knight bd7, you play short castle, and white is better because the main reason is this dark squared bishop on b2. We have it and black doesn't have his. So we are done with this. We are done with bishop c5 variation. So bishop b4 is the move, then we play knight d5, he played bishop c5, and then we play e3. We said there are a few possibilities for black. c6. After c6 we should play d4. There is also knight c6 to prevent d4, but then just play knight e2 and then d4. And there is knight f6 or knight e7. It doesn't really matter. It's basically the same. I mean, knight f6 gives black more options, but because after knight f6 and b4, black could do this. You see, but after knight e7, oh, sorry. But after knight e7 and b4, he will have to take on d5. That gives him like less options, so knight f6 is probably slightly better for him, but basically if he does this and you play b4, knight takes d5 is probably the best move. So basically there is no big difference between these two moves, just he takes on d5 and it will be almost the same variation. So b takes c, knight goes back, you play d4 and so on, you have advantage. So that's it. Now let's see bishop e7. Also interesting variation for him. Yeah, he doesn't want to give us opportunity to play b4 or d4 with tempo. This is very solid move for black. Retreating move, yes, but yeah, very solid. He doesn't want to take a risk. Let's play d4 immediately because we have chance for that. We don't have to prepare it. If he takes with the pawn, that's good for us. That's good for us because queen takes. Now the g7 pawn is hanging. Our queen is centralized and very strong. Then knight f6, and again we should take his bishop on e7. Dark squared bishop is very important. Queen e7, let's pin the knight like this. Knight c6 with tempo, but then just queen c3. Knight e5 maybe, then knight f3. d6, let's take the knight. Queen takes, pawn takes, and then let's play g3 and bishop g2. We can castle short or long, both options are possible, and we are better thanks to our bishop pair, and we will take the d file. We are white here, we are ahead in development, so we have that advantage, so we can place our rooks on the d file first. What happens if he doesn't take the d4 pawn? So bishop e7 was played, and then we played d4. What if he played d6? d6 is the main move. Then let's play e4. Let's gain more space in the center. He has two options: knight c6 or knight f6. Let's see knight f6 first. Again, it is pretty much clear to you, I hope. Just take the bishop, not the knight. Queen e7, then the e4 pawn is hanging, so of course f3. Short castle, then knight goes to e2, and then after c6 our knight goes to c3. You will play bishop e2, short castle, then bishop goes to e3 or to g5, then queen goes to d2, rook goes to d1, and so on. White is better here. The main reason is bishop pair, and of course more space. What if black doesn't play knight f6 after e4? If he play knight c6 to attack the d4 pawn, then let's play knight e2. If he play knight f6, basically just take the bishop on e7, it's clear. Play d5, knight goes back, then you can just play knight c3, or even in this case knight g3 is possible, and then bishop e2. Short castle, this dark squared bishop goes to e3 or g5 with advantage for white. If he okay, he play knight c6, we play knight e2. What if he takes here? Let's take with the knight. He takes with the knight, we take with the queen. Pawn on g7 is hanging, so he plays knight f6, but again we just take the bishop. Queen e7, now our e4 pawn is hanging, so let's just play f3 to protect it. Castle, bishop e2, again our idea is to play short castle. This bishop could simply go to g5 with advantage for white. I think that bishop e7 is one of the simplest variations because you know what to do. It's quite simple, it's just straightforward. So after bishop e7, just play d4. The main move for black is d6, then you should play e4. Then whenever he play knight f6, just take the bishop on e7, and later just play normal. Okay, that's it. We are done with Kramnik-Shirov counter-attack.